microphone. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me back there? Welcome to the first Connected Congresswoman in 2020. Thank you so much for We're trying to find something for me to stand on, but fortunately I'm close to 6 feet tall, so we've got, and you know, there is a competition. Where's Olivia on who's the tallest woman in Congress, and she's going to make sure that I've got that moniker. Oh, thank you. I'll do it where I'm not standing right behind this. Let me do this. You're okay there. Well, but then the folks who are behind that pole. Let's do this. All right. This is hilarious. First and foremost, thank you so much for coming out today, and thank you to Smokey Row for letting us invade your everything right now. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your good work. And the good coffee and ice cream and all that. Hopefully everybody will stay and get something to eat here afterwards and help out the business. But thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to spending another great year with my constituents here in Iowa's 3rd District. I'm here to listen to you, but I just wanted to briefly go over a few things that we did at the end of the year to help Iowans so that you get a good understanding of what actually is going on in Congress, because there's a heck of a lot more than what you're hearing in the news. There's a lot of really good action being taken to help individuals put more money in their pockets, save on the cost of prescription drugs, things like that. And one of our biggest bills that we passed out of the House was in the very last week, and it's H.R. 3, the Elijah Cummings prescription drug bill. This is a fantastic bill to lower the cost of prescription drugs across the country. For those of you who are on Medicare, this is fantastic. It's a massive prescription drug bill. We haven't seen anything like this in our country's history. We all know that we're paying way too much for our prescription drugs. I talk to moms who are working 2 jobs just so their child has the prescription for their ADHD. I've talked to folks who have diabetes who are taking half of their insulin just so they can afford that and put food on the table. So we know this is a problem in our own backyard. And H.R. 3 will allow us to negotiate the 250 most expensive drugs within Medicare and then take that negotiated price and spread that out to every single American who uses those prescription drugs. And not only does it allow us to do that, but we negotiate the cost of drugs so that we no longer pay more than other countries. We're going to, yes. That you all should be paying more for your prescription drugs when we're using taxpayer dollars to fund research and development of those pharmaceuticals right here in our own country. And there's so many other good savings that we're getting from it. But here's the kicker, guys. Over a 7-year period, the bipartisan, it's actually nonpartisan, Congressional Budget Office estimates that America will save somewhere between $350 billion and $700 billion. Now, what are we going to do with that savings? We're going to give that right back to you. We're going to do many things. First and foremost, we're going to set up new programs in Medicare for vision, dental, and hearing. And we're going to take some of that money and reinvest it, put it into research, make sure that the National Institute of Health actually has the resources it needs to address the healthcare issues that this country is facing, to look at some of the rare diseases that are occurring that we can't find cures for, and to finally find some cures for some of those diseases that are hurting your family and your friends. So we passed that bill out of the House.
Yay, science!
Yeah. I would ask you to call our senators and ask them to support it. I know across the board that there's bipartisan support for lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We just need the Senate to take it up. So if we can call Senators Ernst and Grassley and let them know how interested Iowans are in getting this bill through the Senate, that would be a great step forward. So I'd ask you all to do a little homework tonight to make that happen. Secondly, we finally passed USMCA. So we are thrilled that we were able to pass that. We had it in the House for 6 months. We got it in the House Working Group in June from the administration and have actively been working on trying to make it the best bill for this country. I'm excited that the President wanted to open up this agreement to make sure that it worked for America, and then we were able to take the first draft of it and add some pieces on that did a lot for labor. We've got a lot of great labor folks here tonight. Thank you for coming out. And we wanted to make sure that the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement helped all the people in our state, so agriculture, manufacturing, and labor, and that we all could receive some benefit from that. One of the last things that held up USMCA for passing, we had labor provisions and environmental provisions that we wanted to see ironed out, because we always want to make sure that Americans get paid appropriately and that we keep jobs here in this country. So we were able to work out those labor agreements to ensure that it's a more level playing field with Mexico so that they don't undercut our prices, and that forces our wages down and forces our prices down. So we were excited to make that happen. And the other piece that we had to figure out with USMCA was addressing biologics pharmaceuticals and lowering the cost of those, being able to negotiate things like diabetes insulin. These are called biologics. They're made from human genomes. And the first USMCA did not have that protection in there for us to be able to negotiate the cost of those drugs. It did the good thing of protecting the patents for those, which we want to do, but we also want to make sure Americans don't pay more than other folks for the drugs that we produce here. So we ironed out those two things, and the Christmas gift to Iowa was making sure that we had a really good USMCA agreement to move forward for people across this country. So those were two of the big pieces that came out of legislation in the last week. And another big piece was funding the government and appropriations and moving that forward so that we didn't have another government shutdown. And I would say heavily working in a bipartisan fashion, your whole congressional delegation with those of us in the House and in the Senate to make sure that the tax extenders that helped our state got included. Things like biodiesel tax extenders, things that can really help our top industries here in Iowa. So I think overall it was a successful year from starting out with my first bill that I worked on in the House, which was in, my goodness, it might have been February. I had a woman come up to me. Her name was Virginia Fox. She's a Republican out of North Carolina, and she said, I heard you're interested in putting more money back in our local communities. And I said, I'm so glad you heard that. I am. So we wrote a bill to address the grant process in state government, because right now every department does it differently. We leave billions of dollars on the table, and unfortunately it's a lot of rural communities and states like Iowa that don't get as much of the money. So we don't have the big urban areas where we've got folks who work for giant nonprofits and things who are always writing grants. We have some of that, but we lose out a lot. So we wrote this bill. That got signed into law at the very end of this year, so I was very excited. For all of you, I'm going to keep using these sharp elbows to make sure that people know how important Iowa is. I will fight for everything that we need here to put more money back in your pockets, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, give your kids opportunity through trade schools and apprenticeship programs, two-year college programs, make those affordable, loan forgiveness and Pell Grants, and make sure that we bring jobs to these communities. As we finished up the year, we started closing in on a very major climate bill that will come out of Energy and Commerce this coming year, which I'm excited about. And then I have already gone to the head of Energy and Commerce and said, I need to be at the table. Somebody who represents a row crop state needs to be at the table when we're thinking about what this looks like, because our farmers need to we have a stake in this. Our entire economy in Iowa has a stake in this, and not only do we understand that we should be sustainable, but we should be getting the economic viability when we move in that direction. And that's going to come here to Iowa, and I'm going to make sure that we get a big part of that. for the good things that our community needs. I couldn't be doing this job without all of you who come to me with ideas and who literally prop up our towns and our neighborhoods. I thank you for everything that you do. Here's to a great 2020. Let's do this. Apparently, I've got some time to answer some questions, and there's a lot. Okay.
So I'm just going to pull from here. I'll make sure there aren't any repeats so we can make sure to touch on as much stuff as we can. But so the first question we have is from Gregory. And the question is, the Republicans in Iowa are very supportive of wind energy. Something Dems support too. Can you explain other areas you have found common ground with Iowa's two Republican senators?
Absolutely. One of the first bills that I wrote with Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst, it was a health care bill to help children with ectodermal dysplasia, where their teeth don't grow in properly, their sweat glands don't work, and that articulates itself into digestive issues. And those families live in Waukee came to us and said our children have this, and insurance won't cover any procedures to help them get healthy. Well, the Senate, they said because it's cosmetic. Well, the senator and I both said there's nothing cosmetic about children being able to chew and swallow, and so we wrote a bill to address that, and we're trying to find a package. Hey, hi, they're right back here, absolutely. Go talk to these wonderful parents. There you go. That is advocacy at its finest right there. So that's one area. I absolutely know we can find a lot of common ground when it comes to our veterans, when it comes to our military, when it comes to our children and their safety and security. And one of the bills that I brought to the floor was to ensure that we had better procedures and background checks on daycare providers, no matter what the size and no matter where their location is. I'd say those are a couple of really big areas where we were able to find some common ground.
All right, the next one is from Ben. This question is, would you consider supporting the March for Our Lives peace plan?
Ben, I don't know what the full peace plan is part of, so I'd be willing to take a look at that. If you want to send us over a copy, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, okay, this is from Nathaniel. We have talked about how...
Want me to say it, Chloe?
Yes, please.
Oh, hey, Nathaniel.
Okay. We have talked about this before, and we even brought it up with Katie Porter when she was in town about how credit scores and their misuse has actually been detrimental to people, especially people on fixed incomes and like SSI and SSDI. She talked about there's actually already a bill that's in the Finance Committee. I want to know how was that going, and on top of that, what are we doing about the fact that wages are increasing, other things are increasing, but the wages for SSI, SSDI, and retirement benefits have not been going up. And in fact, compared to the rise in Part B premiums, they're actually losing money every month in their Social Security. What are we doing about making sure they don't fall behind and get priced out of their homes, their apartments, and their livelihoods? Thank you.
Yeah, well, you got a lot on that card. So yes, we are working on a bill in financial services. It moved out of committee, to your point, so it needs to go into into a home where it's going to be able to be put into a bill and go out to the floor. But your point about I think inequity is really the issue that we're trying to address. And I'm sorry, just what was the specific? What'd you say? The bill?
She had a bill that deals with use of credit scores.
Yeah. Thank you. So yes, and so to your point, unfortunately, we need to use credit scores in many cases so that financial institutions, insurance companies, etc., understand what they're dealing with when they're putting out their own risk, and that's something that they need to be able to rely on. But we can't have systems in place that limit people who who didn't come from the wealthy zip codes, and that's what we're trying to really address, is to make sure that we're not limiting people who may not have the best credit scores because they haven't had maybe as much opportunity for a good paying job. They may have had just one bad credit issue and it's taking them down. But we really need to look at the opportunities in this country to make sure that it's fair. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We sometimes fall behind on things, and once in a while, if we have a bad time or lose a job or something, these things will happen. But what we don't want to do is limit people from home opportunity and the ability to increase access to their own personal success. So we're writing bills in financial service that not only address it from that perspective, but many others. How do we make this a more equitable place for folks to live? One of the bills that I recently wrote that passed through was for the publicly traded companies to have to disclose where their jobs are located. Right now, they don't have to do that. They do not, publicly traded companies don't have to disclose where their jobs are in this country or whether they're outsourced. And so I want to make sure that we're tracking where jobs are so that we're creating jobs in America that pay people well. So I think that came out of financial services as well. We're really trying to make sure that we're closing that gap of inequity in this country, and that comes by looking at the systems that have been put in place that have given some people opportunity and others not so much. And so that's part of the process, and I know that's a bill that I was all behind, and Katie brought that's her bailiwick, and we're going to continue to move in that direction. And I know you briefly talked about Social Security. There's so much that needs to be done there to make sure that we can shore that up and ensure that every single person in this country who works so hard has a life of retirement and dignity, and for those who are on Social Security that aren't retired as well, so that they've got that opportunity. And I'm going to do every single thing that I can to protect and grow that so that all of you have as much opportunity as your parents had in your retirement.
From Colin, with the threats to the ADA and barriers in the Senate, what can be done to safeguard the health care of people in your district?
We have passed bills to continue to cover people with pre-existing conditions out of the House. Unfortunately, we're seeing an attack on the Affordable Care Act, which could dismantle the coverage for folks with pre-existing conditions. I'd just love to see a show of hands here. Who in this room knows somebody or has pre-existing conditions? I'm raising my, so literally every single one of us. This, folks, is why it is so important that we don't dismantle the Affordable Care Act. This is exactly why we've got to make sure that we protect that coverage for people across this country. The economic impact on folks who have pre-existing conditions and their families, if they don't have coverage, is going to be astronomical. I remember back the days, and it's one of the reasons why I got into this job, when I had my second son. He's 17 years old now, but when my husband and I had our own small business, we bought our own insurance. Well, we couldn't afford maternity coverage because maternity coverage wasn't covered under a plain plan. You had to buy a rider for that. And that cost $1,000 a month, and you had to hold that in place for at least a year before I got pregnant. Well, that meant I had to spend $12,000 out of pocket if I got pregnant on day one, the minute that insurance kicked in. I'm still paying that extra $1,000. I couldn't afford that. So when I had my second son, I'm sorry, I'm getting my two sons confused now. My older 17, this is my 15-year-old. So when I had my second son, we literally had to sell my personal items just to cover the cost of his medical bills because I had a baby in the hospital. Folks, that is the time that we would go back to. If you are not covered by some type of insurance through your business and you become pregnant, that is exactly the time that we will go back to. We have a lot of young people standing here, and I am so thrilled to see all these young faces here. So many of our young folks want to build their own destinies. They want to create their own jobs, their own pipelines, their own opportunities. They want to be able to have good health care coverage, but they don't want to have to be tied down to a particular job just to make that happen. And that's why it's so important that we continue to protect the ACA, that we build on it. I want to introduce, I think we should be able to buy into Medicare as a public option so that everybody can have a choice that works for them. Yeah.
Yeah, but didn't all the providers leave the ACA? In the state of Iowa, all the providers left because it didn't work financially. So how are you going to address that? And it's great. I like what JFK said. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I think it's about time we start talking about all the programs we're going to have. We start talking about, hey, the debt it's going to leave our kids, our grandkids. All we've talked about here today is all the programs, all of the programs. And how do we fix this? ADA was going bankrupt, or ACH was going bankrupt, and everybody knows it in this room. That's a false premise.
So, listen, we're all here to answer some questions. I'll answer this and then we're going to move on because a lot of folks have actually been waiting and we've got a stack here of folks who actually put their questions in, and I want to honor that as well.
I'm about tired of the Democrats being so angry.
So thank you. Good to see you again, Gary. Always nice to see you. Happy New Year, by the way. There were some faults with the ACA. We all know that. We know that there are many things that need to be shored up about it, and some of the provisions that were taken and some of the concessions that were made are the reasons why we had that issue occur. You're absolutely right. And that was because too many people weren't able to come together and really craft a plan that was going to work for everybody. We created some unintended outcomes as a result of it, and those have to be fixed. I couldn't agree with you more. But but taking away coverage for folks when they need it isn't the answer. The answer is fixing those issues, just like you're pointing out, so that we can have a solid system that works for everybody.
Hey, just one point though. Are we going to have another? Are we going to have another? Pass it and then we'll read it type situation. Stop. Wait your turn.
This question
We're
is
gonna have
from
to keep it down for the other customers in the restaurant, okay? Thank you.
This question is from Julie. Julie. She's asking, would you be able to put a task force together to protect Social Security with the privatization of Medicaid? What can be done to prevent the dismantling of Social Security?
What can be done is make sure you elect people who want to support Social Security. Like I want to do. Like I said earlier, that's what we do, folks. And then we find efficiencies within the system so that we can make sure that we protect the monies that we have there and that we grow it so that we can have what people need. There's ways that we can make this work better, but it sure doesn't come by slicing people off at the knees in their retirement ages and saying, you're just not going to have as much money as you thought you did. I've got folks out at Haven Park, out here in Waukee, who Haven Park Capital came in and bought up a mobile home court or a modular housing community. There are people there who are on fixed incomes, and they're saying we're going to jack your rates up 70% now. And I'm working on that because you want to know why? Haven Park Capital was supported by Fannie Mae. That's taxpayer-supported program, folks. Why are they coming into our communities and telling people we're going to jack up your rates by 70%? And these are people on fixed income. So I'm seeing people who are literally only living off of their Social Security can only afford to be in a community where a home that is very affordable. And now we're saying, you know what? That might get privatized, or we're going to take some of that away. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen on my watch, and that's not going to happen on the House majority's watch either. I'll tell you that.
All right, this question is from Ken. HR 1, what would the cost be, what would the cost be to implement this federally?
HR 1? So for those of you who aren't familiar with HR 1, it's a big landmark package we passed out of the House early this year to address multiple issues, specifically voter integrity, to make sure that every voter in this country literally has a voice. That addresses things like gerrymandering. And voter suppression. It also addresses issues with ethics in Congress. Because I'll tell you what, I had a chance to work for all of you for a decade here at the state. I served under 3 governors, both Democrats and Republicans. We all tried to find efficiencies and better ways to deliver services to the people in this state. We tried to find ways where we could look at things from a better perspective to provide more for those who we serve. But when I went out to Washington, what I see is a very dysfunctional place that hasn't spent much effort looking at the processes that they have in place to support the policy, and we're absolutely going after that. And that starts by building trust with your government again, and that starts with Congress. We've got to hold ourselves accountable. We've got to be ethically responsible to the people in this country, and the bill that we put forth would do things like that. You know, like my amendments to it were a lifetime ban on lobbying after your we don't need any more people influencing our elected officials. The only ones that should be influencing them are all of you standing in this room and our other American citizens.
That's right.
Vote for us. And so it's a big package. I don't know what the cost would be to implement that. This is not much of a HR 1's not a big costly package to put through. There's other things that are going to cost this country more. We need an infrastructure bill, folks, and we got to figure out how we're going to pay for that. And unfortunately, that's something that people are having a hard time coming together with. We need the prescription drug bill that I just talked to you about, which will save us lots of money. So I think where we need to be thinking about is looking at those bigger picture items, how we're going to be able to come together on something like infrastructure, which is woefully needed, massively underfunded, but if we don't start addressing it, we're never going to get to the bottom line and take care of it. So that's where we really need to be thinking about how much things are costing. HR 1, from the perspective of overall cost to this country, is really minimal. A lot of it really requires people doing the right thing, oversight over states who are, quite honestly, violating election laws, and making sure that we hold, that everybody in this country, when they go in and vote for a federal official, knows that their vote's being counted.
Good.
One more question. Sorry, losing track here. So this question is asking you to speak to leading with angel families. And then when you stated your thanks for the work she has done, what did you mean?
Why do you refuse to meet with the shelters of angel families? When you met her, you said you were too busy to meet, but you told her thank you for all the work you have done. What did you specifically mean by
I'm not sure what you're referring to and when this was.
At the brewery
in Potawatomi County, is that what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've visited 16 counties every month for 13 months in a row, so I
was held her hand and said from one mother to another, but you refused to look at that issue or meet with her.
No, I think that...
You said you were too busy.
I never said I was too busy to meet with somebody.
Yeah, you said they've got these guys,
well,
they got me scheduled like this.
You heard her say
Go
that?
ahead.
Yes, I did.
No, well, first and foremost, I will say you never heard me say I'm too busy to meet
You
with.
said, oh, they've got me just busy all the time. That's what you said. I have it recorded.
There's a big difference between that
Recorded.
and the fact that my team is scheduling the appointments for what the things that need to be done. So we're trying to manage all of the different issues that are
Someone's
on the
life is
ground
not
here.
as important as a robocall, though, I wouldn't think.
Oh, come on.
Oh, jeez.
I don't know what that means, but I
You
appreciate
know what? Your constituency is very rude and angry. Every
If
time
you don't
I
like
come
it,
to
just
one,
leave then.
and
All right.
rude
Okay.
and
Well,
rude.
so I think that. Well, listen. Come on. Let's take a couple minutes when I come up here. You can talk to, I know my staff is here, and ask them about that.
Okay.
Because seriously, I unfortunately rely on a team to help me get my scheduling done. It's not something I'm able to do at the same time with everything else. So I'd ask you to work with our team to help us make that happen. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here.